Hi, everybody. This is Allie Orwig. I want to welcome you to our presentation today. As always, a couple little housekeeping items before we kick off. We are recording today's session. If you're not able to enjoy it or to join us for the entire presentation, we hope you'll enjoy the presentation, but you may not be able to join us for the entire presentation. It will be on our YouTube channel by the end of the week, so we hope you'll check that out there. And if you need to review it or share it with a coworker, we'd love for you to do that as well. If you do have any questions during today's presentation, please use the Q&A or chat functions. You'll find that by hovering your mouse over the screen, and depending on which view mode you're in, it will come from the bottom or the top, and you can use that to submit your questions. We will have a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation where I will act as moderator. You'll also be able to ask questions verbally at that time if you'd like by using the raise hand function. You find that the exact same way you find the Q&A and chat function. And we will unmute your line and allow you to ask any questions you may have. So without further ado, I do want to go ahead and turn it over to Anthony Velasquez from PharmaForce.
All right, Allie, thank you so much. I really appreciate the introduction, and I am going to go ahead and get started. Before we get started, I just want to say a couple of things. I want to thank the Indiana Rural Health Association for the invite and for allowing me to come and share hopefully some good tips and some good knowledge on 340B and contract pharmacy specifically. And hopefully this is helpful to those that joined the session today and those that watched the session online. So I want to thank Carolyn and Tina and Allie Yu and Phil and those that organized this event. And I really hope that we can bring a lot of value to your members. The other thing that I want to say is I want to thank all of you that are in rural healthcare, working on the TPA side and third-party administrator side and providing a software solution for rural healthcare providers and helping them with their 340B program. I think it's one of the most rewarding things for me to know that I hear, from hospitals all the time that are able to, really keep their doors open because of 340B savings that is coming in because of having a good program in place, because of having a good contract pharmacy network, because of, work that they are doing in caring for their patients and work that we're helping them in managing a compliant 340B program. And this 340B is such a critical part of rural healthcare in general, and ensuring that revenue stream is there and those savings are there to provide services to patients and ultimately the communities that you all serve. So again, I want to thank you. Healthcare is not an easy field to be in these days with the pandemic and the staffing shortages and a lot of other things going on. So thank you for what you do. Third, I want to do a little introduction about myself, just to hopefully you guys can get to know me a little bit better, and hopefully I can be a resource in the future for anyone that needs it. As Ali said, my name is Anthony Velasquez. I am the Chief Product Officer for PharmaForce. PharmaForce is a third-party administrator that is actually a back-to-back class award-winning 340B software company providing software solutions, especially to those in rural healthcare. We have won our award for providing a software solution to entities that are 3 or less covered entities. So we have probably the majority of our clients are critical access, so community hospitals, federally qualified health centers. Big majority of our clients fall under those buckets. My journey started working on the covered entity side, so I was in your shoes. I worked as a 340B analyst and 340B manager, 340B director level roles for covered entities in the federally qualified health center space, for hospitals, and Ryan White's, and many different covered entity types. And ultimately, after being in that space for about 8 years on the provider space, I came over to the technology space and have been with PharmaForce for the last 4 years, helping covered entities with the software side. So I have a perspective from multiple sides of 340B. So I've been a tech, I've been a 340B manager, working closely with hospital administration. I've worked in finance departments, I've worked in compliance departments, and now I've worked in the 340B third-party administrator space. So I certainly have a wide perspective of the 340B program, and I am going to share all of that knowledge with you all today and share with you all some of the mistakes that I've made that hopefully can help you go back to your covered entity and implement some good best practices. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start our presentation. So today's agenda, what I hope to accomplish is to, number one, talk about some goals of the presentation just really quickly. And then I am going to give you a step-by-step plan that you all can go back and go through these and see how you can improve your 340B program. So this is, I've designed and tailored this presentation to be rich in content about what are the best practices in 340B, what are the things that you want to be doing. This is something that can be helpful, hopefully, if you are new to 340B and sort of, just got 340B thrown at you, or if you're a veteran in 340B and just want to go back and make sure that you are checking off these steps. These 6 things that I'm going to be sharing about today are very important groundwork to set in your program to make sure that, number one, you have the basics covered, and then number 2, that you are putting in place some advanced best practices and workflows and processes that are going to help you capture more prescriptions and ultimately increase the savings for your covered entity. So let's go ahead and talk about some presentation goals. My goal is that at the end, throughout this presentation, at the end of this presentation, that number 1, that I have informed, number 2, that I've inspired ideas, and number 3, that I provide value. I want to make sure that you all get a ton of information, inspiration, and value from this presentation that you can then go back and implement this at your covered entities, and hopefully see your savings increase, or maybe see ways in that your 340B program be improved. We can always, 340B is so complex. It's such a large program. There's so many different areas and facets of the program. The manufacturer block situation recently has made the program a lot more interesting than it already was. So there's always something. Your plate is always full. And I've been in 340B for over 12 years and going to the 340B conferences. And every time I attend a presentation, there was always just a lot of notes taken and wanting to go back and implement everything. And the truth is, it's really difficult. I really encourage you to, take, the top 2 to 3 things that you can, that you find helpful, and go back to your covered entity and hopefully look at those things and look how to make your program better, one piece at a time. I do want to add, I did add slide tips. So in each slide, I'm going to add a little tip to that slide that are just little nuggets of knowledge from, mistakes that I've made in the past and things that I've learned from working with, hundreds of rural healthcare providers and providers all over the country. We're in 40 plus states. So, I've seen it all. I've seen all the different EMRs, all the different data sets and implementations and challenges and things like that. So I shared some slide tips that you're going to see in each slide. All right. So step number one, the one thing that you want to know is that you should be strategic. Less is more. There is a tendency in 340B, especially in contract pharmacies, chain pharmacies are notorious for this, but there's a tendency to just register every single pharmacy that exists. There's a tendency to register every program, register every pharmacy without really having data to back it up. So when you are starting a program or building a 340B contract pharmacy network, just highly encourage you to be strategic, be precise, do your research. Some of the ways that a covered entity can take advantage of this or can do some data research and have some data to back up what contract pharmacies and what, where the 340B savings is you can do this in 3 ways. Number one is looking at your e-prescription data. So if you're able to get an e-prescription data set pulled from your electronic medical record, keep in mind, if you have clinics that are on a different electronic medical record, you want to pull that data as well. And you can take that electronic medical record data and you can see where your providers are already sending prescriptions. And you can then take that and look at the volume of prescriptions that are being sent by pharmacy and target your top 10. So that's one way that you can easily go and find. And even today, if you have a contract pharmacy program, this is a practice that is probably worth doing at least quarterly, if not twice a year, just to pull your e-prescription data and make sure that the contract pharmacies that are on your list of e-prescription, volume that you're being sent, that those are part of your network. If those contract pharmacies are not part of your network, then you may not be targeting the pharmacies where most of your patients are going. Okay. Another really good way of doing this is working with third-party administrators. So if you use a third-party administrator today, or working with a third-party administrator, sometimes you can provide them your provider list, and they can help you by going to Walmart and Walgreens and CVS if you have if you reach out to them, and they can help you also figure out with your provider volume, oh yeah, we are getting a lot of prescriptions from those providers at our pharmacies, and here's what an analysis looked like, and they can put together a nice analysis for you. So if you're completely new at 340B, that is probably the easiest way to go. And I'll talk a little bit more about choosing the right TPA and partnerships, but that is an easy way to get some data sets that can show you where your doctors are sending prescriptions. And then the third one is Google. You may know your community. Most rural health providers know what pharmacies are in their communities. Establishing those relationships and keeping the 340B funds in the community. I think it's important. I'm a big believer in partnering up with your local independent pharmacies and making the community stronger through a 340B relationship where there's a fair dispensing fee established, and patients are already going to their community pharmacy provider, etc. Obviously, if you have a retail pharmacy that's owned by your covered entity, that is where you will want the majority of your volume to go, and make sure that you're maximizing 340B there. But no covered entity, no matter how good they are able to really capture really big percentages of their prescriptions at their in-house retail pharmacies. There's always something going to an outside contract pharmacy. And no, not every relationship is a good relationship. This is important to note when it comes to fees. There is a lot of situations where there are companies and there are covered contract pharmacies that are asking for exorbitant fees. So you wanna keep that in mind. You don't have to go into every single relationship. Not every relationship will turn out to be a good relationship in the end for you and for your patients. So just making sure that relationship fits, your entity's needs and your values, and that it's really going to serve your patients. Lastly, consider specialty. Are you doing home infusion? Is there an opportunity for home delivery, especially if you're a healthcare provider? Is there an opportunity to partner up with a pharmacy that can, deliver medications to the patient's home? Those are also more, sort of strategies that you do later on after you've established sort of your core contract pharmacy program. But definitely, one of the challenges with most providers, especially in the rural healthcare space, is getting good data and clean data to know where are my providers writing prescriptions, right? And that's a challenge, right? There's electronic medical records that are all over the place. So that can be a real challenge to get real clean data and know where the prescriptions are going. My slide tip on this is, if you have clinics, speak with your office managers. One of the things that I learned by working on the covered entity side is I will go and do this at multiple covered entities and find that the specialty pharmacies that I signed up for my program thinking they were going to be good because they offer good things and good services were not the specialty pharmacies that the providers at those clinics had relationships with, or the office managers at those clinics had relationships with. So, I realized that it would have been easier to go to the specialty pharmacy that office was already working with and already sending prescriptions to. And that was difficult to identify at the time. And now looking back and being more experienced now, hopefully that's a good tip for you all as you're looking to potentially build contract pharmacy networks that, hey, taking 30 minutes and maybe doing a lunch and learn with the office managers and the physicians at those practices may be it may give you a lot of insight as to where are those high dollar specialty prescriptions going, for example. All right. Step number 2, this is critical. And this is, I will say, this is probably the most important step of all of this. And you can probably swap these out with, put step number 2 as step number 1, but you want to pick the right partner with the right features. And it is so difficult to know. There are many TPAs, third-party administrators, when I say TPAs, but there are many TPAs in the market that all promise, a lot of things, all promise they can do the best 340B program management on your behalf in terms of providing software. And it's not after you sign a contract that you find out that there are features that are missing or things where that partner was really maybe not a good fit for what your needs were as a covered entity. So this is really critical that you find a partner that can support best practice setups, which is e-prescription setup. Working on the TPA side, we encourage every covered entity that if they're able to provide e-prescription data, that is the gold standard. That is the way to go. That is the way where you can be most compliant and capture as much prescriptions as possible. Historically, 340B third-party administrators have only been able to handle things like doing an encounter file with a provider list. The problem with that is that you may be missing out on a lot of refills doing that, because the system might not recognize a refill for a patient that did not come and generate an encounter. So you have to be careful and understand your providers, your TPA's potential features and ability to handle those things. You want to know how they're handling wholesaler drug catalogs. This comes up so much of TPAs missing on thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars because of wholesaler catalog processing delays or missing NDCs or not being able to process NDCs and things like that. So you want to consider that as another critical aspect that you want to ask. If you're in the market for a TPA right now, you want to ask these questions. You want to ask, how do you handle, what do you recommend as the best practice for setting up a 340B program? How do you handle wholesaler catalog processing? Another one is name mismatching. This is a little secret in 340B that unless you've been in the industry, you don't really understand much, but not every third-party administrator has enhanced name matching logic. As you all know, a patient can have a hyphenated last name in the EMR, but non-hyphenated at the pharmacy. When you're matching those two together, if they don't match perfectly and exactly, and the hyphen is not in the same place and there's a space there, that may be a mismatch and not qualify. And if you're running a 340B program today and your TPA doesn't have that logic, you may be missing out on hundreds of prescriptions a month, potentially, if not more. And if you do have a TPA who is not able to handle this, you will need a manual workflow to make sure that you're at least reviewing those. There's a way that you can review those to capture those. Reprocessing is another one. We work with a lot of rural healthcare providers who don't have the resources to automate some of their files. And sometimes there's times where we can help them do that. There's other times where they need to send it to us manually, and we get some entities that are sending us files, for example, once a week. We have a logic that can reprocess their claims every single day for 30 days. So even if the file is a little bit late, we're able to make sure that they get credit for all of those transactions or prescriptions that would have been eligible. So those are some of the things that are really important. I can't stress enough. That's why my slide tip is that this entire slide is important. I can't stress enough how important it is to have the right partner and understand the features of that partner, because you will need a third-party administrator to manage your program. There's no way to do it without one. In probably 99% of the cases, you need a third-party administrator. All right, moving on. Now, once you get a third-party administrator, and let's say that you are a covered entity that is currently in implementation with a third-party administrator, I want to stress a couple of points to you. Is moving fast always better? The answer is no. I can't tell you enough how many data problems we are finding and we're able to help our covered entity clients uncover during the implementation phase, where in most cases, and again, I've been on the covered entity side, so I can relate. I understand that we want everything to move fast, everything to go as fast as possible. The issue is that fast is not always better. You want quality. You want to make sure that once you set a program up, that program is set up for years and that program is going to work smoothly. I've seen so many times where an implementation is rushed and then we have to, wipe everything and reprocess everything because a couple of weeks later, the covered entity found that they were missing certain areas of their hospital they weren't sending, or they were sending a certain field wrong and things like that. So just want to encourage you, if you're in the middle of an implementation right now, make sure that you're taking your time. And I mean, in a reasonable level. I'm not saying that you need to take 6 months or anything like that, but just make sure that you're being thorough. Make sure that you understand your TPA capabilities, qualification logic. As I mentioned in the previous slide, that's very important, especially, this presentation is not geared towards the mixed use side or the split billing side of 340B. But even there, we see a lot just covered entities struggling to pull good, clean data from their EMRs, and often having big challenges to do that. And we're often assisting in that and helping that. So make sure that you have a partner that is helping you understand and helping you verify that that data is correct. As much as possible, please automate your data. I know it can be costly to pay a third-party vendor, see how your TPA can help, but if you can automate sending those files to your TPA every day, it is truly the best way to go over doing a manual upload of data. And then again, I just want to repeat this: validate the data. Make sure that you have quality data. Make sure that that data that's extracted and sent to your TPA is correct, and sit there and spot check and pull up your electronic medical record and verify that when that patient had that encounter generated, that encounter was a true encounter, that it wasn't a COVID-19 vaccine, or that it wasn't a radiology test or blood work or something like that. That's not truly an encounter, but that it was truly a provider visit, a clinic visit, for example, or an emergency room visit or an inpatient stay. Make sure that you're validating that data for accuracy. One of the best things that we have seen work for us as we provide TPA services is using a test environment has been a lifesaver. As you're working with your TPA, see if your TPA can provide you a preview of what your data is going to look like in their TPA before ultimately it's put in production. This is very key to finding. I can't tell you how many times we get a covered entity saying, "Hey, these providers are all exclusive. They only work for us. They're full-time providers that are covered entity." And then after we process it in our testing environment and share those prescription volumes, the covered entity comes back and says, "You know what? We were auditing these, and Dr. Smith does work at another covered entity. So we actually need to change his configuration to being a part-time provider, or we need to remove him, or her, whatever the case is." But we have seen that being something that our covered entities have had challenges with, and we're able to catch that because we have a test environment. So slide tip. The best setups that I've seen are ones where you can utilize a multi-tiered level logic. So you can do e-prescriptions, you can do providers, and you can do encounters. So basically, if your e-prescription, great, awesome, we're going to capture those. But if you have providers who are not currently e-prescribing, they're still using pads, or they're not, entering everything in the electronic medical record, those can be caught with a encounter plus provider logic. So, you'll make sure that nothing really is leaking from your 340B eligibility. Okay. Step number 4, now that you're live and you're processing prescriptions, right, and you have those best practices set up in place, you are you have selected your right contract pharmacies, you have those great relationships in your community, you expanded your program, maybe you added some chain pharmacies, some Walmarts, maybe you added some more local independents. Now you have your TPA processing those claims. One of the things that's really important to look for is, can your TPA provide you non-capture claims? And having a manual review workflow. This is really important, that 340B is not just set it and forget it. It requires ongoing maintenance. In addition to the normal stuff like, auditing and those types of things, I'm really focusing this presentation on helping expand capture rates. But you want to review that not only are you looking at your capture claims and you have an audit program in place, that is auditing claims at least monthly as recommended by HRSA and others. But you want to go ahead and review non-capture claims. Some TPAs have different terminology, but these are prescriptions that did not pass their eligibility logic, right? So, you want to have a process in place where you're looking at prescriptions that are they're prescriptions for your patients, but there's no matching visit. The provider doesn't match. There's a wholesaler catalog issue. There's a name mismatch issue. There's a location issue. There's a look back period issue. I mean, there's a lot of different things that can be in play here. Another one, especially in the rural healthcare space, is orphan drugs. You want to review orphan drugs too, and you want to see where there's opportunity for voluntary pricing. One of the things that we offer for free on our website at thepharmaforce.com is a free quarterly orphan drug, where we actually give you an orphan drug list and show you ones that the manufacturer is providing voluntary 340B pricing. And you want to make sure that those are included with your TPA, because there can be a lot of opportunity there as well. But again, a manual review workflow is something that you really need to have, and it can be an easy way to improve your program value. You have something like once a week or once a month, you have someone on your team, or maybe you're working with a consultant that is looking at these claims, that is looking in your EMR, checking, should this have truly been a non-capture prescription? Warning, there's some TPA partners that don't allow you to change the status of these prescriptions right in their platform or their software solution. That's a great question to ask is, hey, how can I review my prescriptions that are not captured? You want to ask that, because this is one opportunity that I see over and over again, a lot of covered entities not having a plan in place, not having a workflow in place, not having an SOP, a standard operating procedure in place for how to handle this situation. There can be a significant, I actually heard of a friend of mine who is in the 340B space. He's a consultant. He was working with a large hospital, and that hospital was with another TPA, and found $1 million, over $1 million of prescriptions that were missed from capturing by that TPA because of a wholesaler catalog issue. Had that covered entity not had a process in place to review those claims, that it was, I believe, it was $1.1 million of opportunity that they were able to recapture because they had a workflow in place to make sure that this is being confirmed. Here's a slide tip. If you don't have resources to do this, there are many consultants that would do this. If you need help, I'm sure that the association can help, but please reach out to me and I will get you connected with a really good consultant that can help with implementing some of these steps in place, and maybe even reviewing these claims on your behalf. There are consultants that solely focus on rural health providers, which I think that's important to have, to work with people that align with your values. All right, so step number 5, we're getting close to the end, but step number 5 is a referral capture process. So similar to the previous point, where these prescriptions are prescriptions for your patients, right? But they are not from your doctors. So these are prescriptions where your clinic, your primary care clinic, for example, maybe saw the patient, referred the patient out to a GI specialist or neurology or endocrinology, and those patients go to that healthcare provider with a referral from your facility. They then receive treatment and are prescribed a prescription. That prescription is 340B eligible under the referral health policy, or referral health or patient definition, if you will. It's a must-have in 2022. There are still some entities that don't have this in place. Highly, highly encourage you. This is a secret weapon to increase your savings by 20, 30, 40, 50% in some cases, if you're referring out to a lot of different specialists. So you got to update your policy to reflect this process. I've seen a lot of covered entities targeting specialty prescriptions, but basically you can target any prescriptions. Specialty pharmacy, contract pharmacy relationships are now increasing based on this opportunity of referral capture. You know, there's patients that are forced to go to an Accredo and are forced to go to a CVS Caremark and some of these others that it may be in your best interest to have a contract pharmacy relationship with those specialty pharmacies in hopes of increasing or finding more referral capture prescriptions. So here's a slide tip. If you are working with specialty pharmacies, there are cases where you could be missing prescriptions because the NDC on those prescriptions is only available via a secondary wholesaler. So you want to ask that specialty pharmacy, do you only work with the primary, with the big three, with the Amerisource, Cardinal, McKesson, or do you have other secondary wholesalers that we can establish 340B accounts for, and those accounts can then be used to replenish drugs at 340B when they're being acquired through a secondary wholesaler or even directly from the manufacturer. So in some limited distribution models for specialty prescriptions, this can be the case. So I just want to share that slide tip with you, because that's something that a lot of covered entities don't know, that there are some of the big chains like in Accredo, Specialty, and others that they do have relationships where there's some NDCs they can only buy through a secondary distributor or a secondary wholesaler, and those accounts have to be established in order for there to be a replenishment of those claims at 340B. All right, great. So now we've gotten your program set up. Now we've identified the pharmacies. We have identified that you should be working with good pharmacy partners and good TPA partners, and you have a process in place for manual prescriptions. You've picked the best features. You've picked you have a process in place for a referral capture prescription. Now you got all these things, right? And now the talk of the market is the manufacturer blocks, right? So let's get into it. So I obviously do not want to give anyone legal advice on this issue. This is a hot button issue in the industry right now. Please consult with your counsel, your advocacy groups, your association. I am everything that I provide based on this is totally my opinion. You know, the impact of this varies by manufacturer. I highly want to encourage everyone to please make sure that your leadership is informed of the impact of this. In most cases, rural health providers are exempt in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, rural health providers are exempt from this. You know, there is some impact of needing to select like one pharmacy, a designated pharmacy. We've seen just a wide range of impact where mostly the big hospitals, big dishes and things like that are the ones that are really the ones where the manufacturer blocks are heavily impacting. But it's also happening with rural healthcare, with, you know, critical access hospitals and federally qualified health centers and things like and those types of entities. So highly encourage you to be educated on the matter, know what's going on the matter. We actually I did an in-depth webinar on the topic. I want to say it was last month, which is available for download on our website, where I went through some of the steps that you can take to mitigate this issue. Highly encourage you to track the impact of this issue. this is certainly something that is impacting covered entities, some in the millions of dollars of opportunity being completely removed or taken away if you have a large number of contract pharmacies, or I won't even say a large number, but even for CEs that you might have a contract pharmacy network of 5, and that manufacturer block notice says we will only provide 340B pricing to one pharmacy. There are 4 other pharmacies where now your patients are not able to get 340B pricing if, for example, you have a cash card program in place, or you were receiving 340B savings from that relationship. So and there's just really odd requirements. They're really all over the place. There is now, I want to say there is, don't quote me on this, about 17 to 18 different manufacturers that have now sent out letters to covered entities informing them of some sort of change that they are doing with their policy for offering 340B pricing to the contract pharmacies. I do want to add too that most are allowing you to access the 340B pricing as a covered entity at all your pharmacies if you provide data via a new site or a new portal called 340B ESP that works in partnership with the manufacturers, and entities have raised a lot of concerns about whether this data can be shared with a third-party vendor like 340B ESP. There are questions about the legality of who owns the data, who can share that data. Is that data the pharmacy's data? Can the pharmacy say, I refuse to share that information? So there's a lot of different questions around the topic, and there's a lot of different opinions on the topic. What I can say is we are supporting our entities and whatever they choose. We have some entities that are choosing based on principle not to provide the data to 340B ESP and to have their pricing limited across their contract pharmacies, and we completely support and stand behind them in that decision. And we also have covered entities that are saying, hey, look, I'm losing $1 million a month. We need to submit this data. Let's go ahead and set up a process, and we have that process available for those covered entities as well. So we really are neutral on the matter, and we're supporting covered entities in any way that brings the most value to their patients and their communities. And that's sort of our stance on it. I do want to add a slide tip. If you are a covered entity and you currently have a TPA and a 340B program in place, because these happen so quickly, right? For some of them, there was probably a week's notice. For some of them, shorter than that. There were times where some TPAs in the market were not able to block them quickly enough. And what happened was that the wholesalers loaded retail-like pricing on a 340B account. So we have seen reports of many covered entities that unfortunately had situations of overpayments because the drug was $50 one day and the next day it was $500 on their 340B account. And if you have an automatic ordering process in place, then that drug would have ordered at the higher pricing. The good news is that you can submit an overcharge through HRSA and try to recoup some of those savings. But if you have not really looked at how your TPA is handling this situation at a manufacturer level, highly, highly, highly encourage you to do so as soon as possible. That is it. Those are my 6 tips. Just to recap, we talked about being strategic. We talked about less is more. We talked about picking the right partner with the right features. We talked about implementation and making sure that you have a good quality program in place and prioritizing quality over speed. We talked about having a manual review process where you're checking those claims that are yours but fail eligibility for a certain reason. We talked about having a referral capture process in place where you are finding those prescriptions that were referred out to a specialist. And we talked about managing the manufacturer blocks, which can be something that is hurting entities a lot right now. A lot of entities have not even picked a designated contract pharmacy, which is the minimum that at least can be done as you decide whether you want to submit the data or not. So highly encourage you. Here's my information. I have provided my personal cell phone number and email. Please reach out if you have any questions or we can help in any way. I hope that I was able to provide a lot of value, and we'll open it up for some questions. Ali, if you could help me out here and know how would you like to do this?
Yeah, so if you haven't sent in your questions yet, we encourage you to do that now. We did have one comment for you that it was a great presentation. So that's what I've got right now, but certainly we'll leave the line open for just a moment. Please, again, use the Q&A or chat function by hovering your mouse at either the top or the bottom of the screen. It'll pop up for you. Alternately, you can raise your hand and ask your question verbally if you would like, and the raise hand function is right there with that Q&A and chat function. So we'll leave the line open for just a minute. I will second the individual that commented. It was a really great presentation, a lot of good information included in there. So very much appreciate your time, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, not seeing any come in, I will go ahead and thank everyone for attending today and tell you to enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.